Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Sayaka Toyama. I am the director of SEIZAN Gallery. I really appreciate everybody being here. It's very beautiful outside, but I'm glad you guys get to hear and be part of the talk today. We are honored to welcome two very special guests this afternoon, artist Keiko Arai, who has traveled all the way from Japan, and Susie Ferrell, Associate Curator of Chinese Art at Lacma. She traveled from LA for this. Together, they will guide us through the rich history of ink painting and take a deeper look at the unique sensibilities that define Keiko's practice. Keiko is a self-taught ink painter who has exhibited extensively in Japan, France, Korea, and the US. Her recent solo exhibition, various colors of Sumi, exploring the ink of Nara, was held at the Nara Prefecture Museum of Art Gallery in Japan. We first met Keiko through Susie a few years ago after Susie's a studio visit in Japan. And we are truly honored to present Keiko's first solo exhibition in New York here at SEIZAN. As Associate Curator of Chinese Art at Lacma, Susie Ferrell specializes in contemporary Chinese ink painting. She has worked closely with both the Yuzu Foundation collection and the Foundation Ink collection, and played a key role in securing the landmark promised gift of 400 works of contemporary Chinese and global ink art to Lacma. One of her notable curatorial projects includes Ink Dreams, selections from the Foundation Ink collection. And now I hand the mic over to Susie. She will begin today's program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Sayaka and SEIZAN Gallery for inviting me to be here and to speak about Keiko-san's work. I'm going to begin by giving a very abbreviated background on some of the major movements and themes related to ink art in East Asia during the middle and end of the 20th century, as a sort of intro to present-day ink and to provide some context for the work that we'll see from Keiko Arai in the gallery. Then I'll talk a bit about Keiko-san's work specifically, and finally we'll have a conversation about Keiko-san's work with the help of our translator, Akiko Iko-san. And I think by the end of this talk and this conversation, you'll understand Keiko-san as really a deeply committed and experimental artist. Okay. So in 2021, I curated an exhibition at Lacma of East Asian ink art with the intention of expanding the way that we think about this genre to look at not only works created within Asia and not only pieces made with ink, brush, and paper, but also works in other media and from other locations that capture the spirit of these centuries-old lineages of East Asian ink painting. The goal was to look at ink art holistically, rather than as the sum of set of physical components or lineages, expanding to include sculpture, photography, and video, but also include artists outside of Asia who had been inspired by East Asian ink. And so I'd like to start today by talking about some of the artists throughout ink art history who have worked to expand the genre of ink beyond its narrow confines of black ink on white paper. I'll start by saying that there is a historical precedent for ink artists foregoing traditional ink materials, instead letting their fingers, fingernails, lotus pods, husks, scrunched up paper, splashing techniques, or even their own hair take the place of a brush in an experimental fashion. This was being enacted by specific artists throughout ink art history. Experimentation in painting is, of course, very natural. It's nothing new. It's been around for a very long time. And while we can look at the state of ink painting today and see works that are so contemporary and so purely abstract and non-figurative, and think that they could only have happened in our contemporary day and age, we must recall that unlike oil or acrylic paint, contemporary ink art has early predecessors dating back over a millennium. as early as the 8th and 9th century that already linked the medium to abstraction, pattern repetition, imagined worlds, and phenomenological traces of the artist's movements. One of the most common subjects from ink painting history is the landscape. In China, specifically for literati artists who were kind of scholarly hobbyist painters as opposed to professional court painters, the favorite subject was the imaginary landscape, reflecting a manifestations of the artist's internal world as opposed to scenery that you actually found in life. The inner landscape, the mountains and rivers that flowed through the mind, became the subject of works of literati artists and writers like Susie, who valued the process of self-expression over realistic depiction. The literati sought not to translate what they saw into their paintings, but to spontaneously put down on paper the landscape that came to them. So this could have plants that wouldn't naturally grow together. This could have streams flowing as if from nowhere, craggy cliffs that couldn't physically bear the load of what was upon them. In these abstract landscapes, we also see tidy, sometimes formulaic leaves and waves repeated over and over again with a skilled hand. So I like this example of an album, actually from Lacma's own collection by Zhang Hong. We can see in this painting the way that he repeats different leaves over and over again, different waves over and over again, and squiggles. Might be a little bit hard to see on the monitor, but I can send you the information if you want. Here's an up-close image showing the leaves repeated over and over again. We can also look at the enso, a common abstract or phenomenological subject matter in Japanese painting history. This circular form is common in Zen painting and can hold many symbolic meanings, including enlightenment, emptiness, and the universe. It's also an early and continuing example of non-figurative or phenomenological painting, a record of the phenomenon of a single quick flowing movement by the artist, a single large brush stroke. We can even look at calligraphy practice. Flat black ink on plain white paper from artists who choose to really push their cursive characters further and further and really toe the line between legibility and pure abstraction. Okay, and so then we go beyond making paper. This is a natural place where artists have historically and now currently been experimenting with ink. I like to bring up Zhang Chen as kind of an earlier example, and an exemplary experimental ink artist on the cusp between tradition and modernity. Although he originally painted in a traditional Xuemohua style, he shifted his style to incorporate expressive splashes of ink and wash in the 1960s. But Zhang expanded upon the ink tradition even further in the 1970s and early 80s, when he collaborated with the photographer Wu Chongxian to create photographic works in the style of traditional bird and flower paintings, complete with Zhang's ink-on-photo calligraphic inscriptions. Here on the left, you see a painting by Zhang Qian, and on the right, you see one of his collaborative works with Wu Chongxian. As you can see, there are a lot of similarities between these works. The angle of the view, the plain background, the inscription. Zhang Qian really set up these photographs so that they would look not just like a standard snapshot, but really kind of emulate the composition of a bird and flower painting. The photographs are hand-colored, and aside from the pink of the lotus blossoms, are true to Zhang's standard color palette, emphasizing tones of blue and green. And then kind of later in the late 20th century and in the early 21st century, we see artists begin to bring ink further and further away from paper. So Dai Guangyu painted this calligraphic work in ink on ice, and then documented it as the ice melt. We have a Korean artist, Lim Ok-sang, who paints in ink on kind of a mixture of soil and a binding material. We have Ri Kipong, who emulates the aesthetics of an atmospheric ink painting using acrylic on plexiglass. Nguyen Quang Thong, a Vietnamese artist, bringing ink into lithography and kind of East Asian ink into lithography. Zheng Guangqi, using the spine of a book to print ink in his work. People are experimenting. And then I also want to bring up how ink has left Asia. And ink also has a precedent of leaving Asia. In the history of Chinese court painting, for example, you would not have a complete history without mention of Giuseppe Castiglione. Castiglione, who was a late 17th, early 18th century painter, was an Italian Jesuit missionary who spent half a century painting in the courts of emperors Kangxi, Yongzheng, and Qianlong. His style fused Chinese and Italian traditions, adopting the Chinese mediums of ink and mineral pigments, as well as compositional elements, while relying on the style and techniques of his training in Renaissance Italy, resulting, for example, in a composition of three-dimensional horses sited against a relatively flattened landscape. A more modern example might be the abstract expressionists, many of whom were in direct contact with Asian ink artists in the mid-20th century. While for some artists the influence of ink might have been subtle, others like Pollock, shown here, Kandinsky, Henri Guichot, specifically cited ink art as a major source of inspiration in their works, and it truly shows. One of the most instrumental artist groups in communicating modern East Asian ink art to the West was the Bokujinkai. In 1952, Bokujinkai, literally the Ink People Society, a modern group of Japanese calligraphers, sought to draw global attention to Japanese calligraphy. This group was established in Kyoto by calligraphers Morita Shiryu, Inu Yuichi, who's shown here on the right, Aguchi Sogen, Nakamura Bokuchi, and Sekiya Yoshimichi. These artists favored fast, bold, energetic brushstrokes and single or few character compositions, pushing the connection between performance and writing. In an effort to gain international visibility, the Bokujinkai really kind of pushed a manifesto of theirs that was published in the first edition of their journal, Bokujin. This read, "Calligraphic art, which has preserved a long tradition in a remote corner of the East, has finally come into view of the world. But will it be served as a truly modern art, or will it be abandoned and self-destruct after the progressive artists absorb it?" By the mid-1950s, these artists had gained the attention that they set out to achieve and were beginning to show their art around the world alongside works by modern avant-garde artists. During this time, an enduring link was established between East Asian calligraphy and East Asian ink art and abstract American and European artists. And the artists themselves contacted one another through letters, in-person meetings, and collaborations. At that time, in the 1950s, other artist groups began to emerge, and many artists throughout East Asia moved away from ink. The Gutai movement, which was founded in 1954 in Osaka, created conceptual and performance works and held happenings. Monoha, a Japanese-Korean movement of the 1960s and 70s, emphasized the relationship between different objects in installation works, exploring and experimenting with the possibilities of different materials and quotidian objects. The Dansei-kwa artists in South Korea worked in minimalist color palettes and focused on repeated line and mark making, and exhibited together often from the 1970s on, though they've never really firmly identified as a movement. At the same time, China emerged from the Cultural Revolution. During this 10-year period from 1966 to 1976, Mao Zedong insisted that socialist realism or proletariat realism, a vibrant party-serving oil painting style, was truly the only nationalistic form of painting. The style is marked by images of workers, peasants, and soldiers, the happy proletariat, and Chairman Mao himself. In addition to this being the only party-sanctioned artistic style at the time, it was implied that it would be anti-nationalist to paint in another medium or style, such as ink art, in order to aid in this proletariat realism effort by abolishing organizations that served the interest of the upper class, like arts organizations. Mao closed all institutions of higher education in China at this time, including art academies and artistic styles, aside from proletarian realism or socialist realism, were deemed bourgeois. After the end of the Cultural Revolution in 1976, painting was once again taught in art academies and universities that had been closed in the decades prior. And I bring up this work by the artist Yang Jiechang. He began this series in the 1980s as really an exploration of ink. Academies, after this resurgence, had undergone a major change. And so instead of only offering programs in Chinese media, they also offered programs in Western painting. Therefore, although artists were once again given the chance to learn ink painting, they also had the tools to experiment with other media and forms imported from the West. A major theme or genre that then kind of emerged out of these many different, very varied artistic movements, artistic groups, academies, was abstraction and process-based phenomenological artwork. In the 21st century, we see more and more ink artists move towards pure abstraction. For example, like this work by Chin Feng, kind of distilling a single element of ink painting or calligraphy, such as a stroke or dot, and isolating this as the focal point of an artwork. We see artists who paint in a certain form over and over again. This is a mountain range work by Kim Ho-duk, and a close-up shot of the mountain range on the right. This is hard to see, but artists who kind of explore the tonal qualities of ink and water, or the quality of a wet or dry brush stroke, thin or thick. This is a work by the artist Wang Tiande, where he's kind of innovated with his materials. He's using cigarettes and incense sticks to actually burn lines into his paper, as opposed to painting on a paper. Wu Zicong, a Taiwanese artist, uses video to make bird and flower paintings. Huang Yan, iconic photography work. Or we can see Xu Bing actually creating landscapes using light and trash, just the shadows of trash in a light box. Performance and this kind of phenomenology and this action of ink painting has also risen greatly in the past few decades, and even land artwork. I like to give this as an example of kind of where we are now with contemporary ink art through the work of Sherazade Hoshieri. Sherazade Hoshieri is a British-Iranian artist who's making work that's neither really East Asian nor really using ink, but has an affinity with contemporary ink artwork. And through this kind of, they share this sort of repeated gesture, this minimalism, this interest in the phenomenon of mark making. It's the artist's intention that her works, quote, capture the rhythm of her breathing, to, quote, find the essence of my own existence, transcending name, nationality, and culture. And so, very, very quick summary of how we got here. and how artists have experimented. And I really wanted to focus on that in my little introduction because I see Keiko's work as so deeply experimental and widely experimental as well. She kind of plunges deeply into her experiments, but she also does many different types of experiments. I met Keiko-san in 2023, a couple of years after I opened the Ink Dreams exhibition at Lacma on a visit to her studio in Japan. And I instantly saw the connection between her work and these meditative, abstract ink artworks that I had curated in Ink Dreams for Lacma. She's truly experimental in her practice. And what is an experimenter without a lab? When I went to Keiko-san's studio early in our visit, she moved aside a small curtain and revealed stacks and stacks of neatly arranged tubs of ink. These had started as ink sticks, ground down into a powder and then mixed with water and mikawa, an animal-based glue, and finally stored in plastic containers. When I asked her about this collection of ink, she told me that she had received a package from Bokuando Company in Nara back in 2014. Inside was a set of 100 different ink sticks, each varied in its components. What kind of soot was used to make the ink, what proportion of mikawa glue, when they were made, and as a result, their tones and properties varied as well. Day after day, she would grind the ink, entering a state of mindfulness, monitoring her breathing and the rhythm of air going in and out, drawing a parallel between her cycle of breath and the motion of the ink stick. This is how the series Now and Then was born, an exploration of the qualities of these different inks. Keiko-san takes this as an indicator of the connection between her materials, ink and washi, and nature. Her paintings are less an effort of controlling and contorting ink and more a process of facilitating the effects they are naturally interested in creating. Bleeding, smudging, pooling, and through this experimentation, an artist like Keiko will learn over time how to prompt the aesthetic response they desire from this medium, and how the ink and its effects vary from one block to the next. This is another work, the Now and Then series. And then from the Now and Then series came a video work called Sanbanza. This was set at Sanbanza, Thailand in Funabashi, a part of Tokyo Bay. In this video, Keiko-san's experiments in ink are set in motion, the careful in and out of her breathing that gave way to the movement of her ink pushed into rigorous motion by the wind. In this piece, Keiko draws a connection between the agency of the ink freely moving and absorbing into the paper, and the agency of the wind in dictating the painting's dance performance. In anticipation of this talk and interview, Keiko-san wrote me a beautiful phrase about her materials, and I wanted to share this with you. With a flexible mind that accepts challenges and a playful, curious spirit, every encounter feels fresh and new. Delicate emotions as well as powerful, overflowing energy, washi accepts them all. I paint by placing my thoughts onto the ink and letting them soak deeply into the fibers of the washi paper. You may have noticed that while the previous works have explored the subtle tonal variations of ink, of black ink, we have not yet seen vibrant color pigment in Keiko-san's work. Traces of the Heart is a notable departure from her standard materials as she incorporates a vibrant patina of copper and indigo pigments into her work. And to really get the full color, you can turn around and see this piece. One of her pieces that has this indigo and copper incorporated. And Spatina instantly, to me, recalled historical work. So not only green and blue paintings, but richly patinated bronze objects as well. And it's actually quite curious because I was talking to Keiko-san just before the talk today, and she told me that the copper pigment in these pieces actually represents the future for her. And the indigo pigment that's kind of made using this historical fermentation process represents the past. In addition to these kind of medium and smaller scale paintings in the series that you see in the gallery today, Keiko-san has also incorporated this pigment practice into one of two commissions that she created for Hojoji Temple in Funabashi in 2013. Built into the very walls and doors of the temple, Keiko-san's pieces Beyond the Sky and Beyond the Universe become a part of the temple itself. Hojoji Temple has existed in Funabashi for nearly half a millennium. Keiko-san sees this location as a place where life and death, past and present, intersect. The work she created for the temple appropriately reflects upon and recalls the past through these aesthetic references to art history, while also being firmly rooted in the contemporary. In other works, she also plays with bringing the material of washi, the washi paper, out of its context as a mere artistic ground, and addressed its physical properties as a three-dimensional sculpture. We see this in her semi-sculpture works like Ancient Egg here. While this work does include some paint pigment incorporated into it, the washi is partially responsible for dictating the tonal range of the works in these textured shadows. In other semi-sculpture works, Keiko-san builds up these layers even further, and they become deeper to be viewed by 3 sides, and then by 4 in her installation works, such as Between Black and White. I want to close my short talk today by bringing up the betweenness of this final installation work. In Between Black and White, Keiko-san does 2 things. First, she encourages us to think of the dimensionality of ink and washi, their physical beingness. Washi as an absorbent, porous membrane, and ink as an active agent, ready to flow and permeate through the washi. This area between each side of the washi, between the moment that Keiko lays down her ink and the moment when it is dried and solidified, manifests fluctuation, change, and possibility. When I first visited Keiko in 2023, it was one of my first international trips since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this betweenness felt so poignant for what we had been experiencing in the 3 years prior. Both a time of liminality, of waiting patiently, and a time when people in the United States, but also around the world, were very pointedly continuing to try to figure out how to relate to one another and to connect and communicate. And I think that Keiko-san summed this up quite beautifully in another quotation about this work. She said, "As I express myself with washi paper and sumi ink, I am always thinking about the space between the white washi paper and the black of sumi ink. There exists an infinite number of colors that connect and expand with memories deep in the heart of each person. Various relationships exist between objects, places, and people. Black and white appear to be opposites, but if we trace back to the source, we realize that they are somehow connected." While recalling artwork from abstract experimental ink art history and embracing contemporaneity, Keiko-san's works deftly navigate the past and present and invite us to consider all that is in between. Thank you. And now I'm very glad that we're not so distant, and we can transition into a short presentation from Keiko and then a conversation between the two of us. So I'll just change the slides over quickly. Bring up Keiko's slides.
So thank you so much. So wonderful talk, Susie. Thank you.それでは私の方からは今スージーさんが随分紹介してくださいましたけれども、私の最近の活動について少しこちらでご紹介をさせていただきたいと思います。
Thank you for your nice introduction about me, Susie, and I would like to now present. I would like to explain. I would like to introduce some of my works to you.
で先ほど日々刻々やいろいろなシリーズの作品の紹介をしてくださいましたけれども、最初にまずペインティングのご紹介をさせていただきます。ペインティング、はい。
Susie referred to one of my series called Now and Then, but I would like to mention something about the painting.
はい。でこちらは先ほど100種類の異なる墨に出会ってから描き始めた日々刻というシリーズになります。
This is one of the pieces from Now and Then series, which I created after I received or encountered the 100 different types of inks.
こちらもその時に生まれてきたシリーズたくさんあるんですけれども、少しご紹介をさせていただきます。
Many pieces came out of that experience, but I would like to introduce some of them to you.
でこちらは展示風景なんですけれども、日々刻々という作品を、そのまま和紙の表と裏を見せながら、展示をしたシリーズになります。
This is an installation where I exhibited the paintings from Now and Then series, but as you can see each work from both the front and the back side.
でこちらも美術館での展示風景になります。はい、富山の美術館、日本の富山の美術館での展示風景になります。
This is a picture from my exhibition at Toyama Museum in Japan.
で色を使った作品を先ほど紹介していただきましたけれども、いくつか近年色と墨と自分の中の内面のイメージで少し色をプラスしながら描いていっているシリーズです。
These are the series of paintings that incorporate certain colors, as Susie touched on earlier on. And I incorporate colors aside from the sumi ink to express what is inside of me.
で今回ですね境界領域というゾーンというシリーズで、初めて皆さんにお見せするシリーズになるんですけれども、こちらの作品のシリーズになりますが、こちら
The piece right behind me, for instance, that is on the screen as well, is a piece from my new series, Zone, which I'm introducing for the first time to the world today.
でこれはコロナの時にやはり人と人との距離や場所の距離がいろいろ変化したというところで、その距離の変化をどういうふうに感じるかというところで描き始めたシリーズになります。
I started working on these pieces from my experience during the pandemic, when I experienced the distance between people, distance between me and others, have actually fluctuated in an interesting way.
ここでいう境界というのは、分け隔てるということではなくて、 その異なるものがそこで共有して溶け合うようなそういう境界を描いています。
The word borderline here does not mean something that separates two different things, but something, it is an area where two different things coexist and share the same space together. It's a place of melding.
で先ほど襖絵を紹介していただきましたけれども、日本では10空間の中でですね、空間を隔てる襖としてのアートを楽しむという文化がありました。でこちらはお寺、先ほどのお寺の襖絵になりますけれども、2013年に2つの空間を隔てる襖を描きました。
In Japan, there is a tradition of enjoying a free open space by dividing up that space with these sliding doors and to enjoy the space with the art that using the Fusuma sliding doors. And this is a picture of my work that was exhibited in 2013 at a temple. And these sliding doors create two spaces out of one.
でこちらは私が初めて描いた動く空間というところの襖絵になります。
This is a picture of the Fusuma sliding doors that are moving in the free moving space. It's a free flowing space. It is the movement of the sliding doors.
でこちらは越前の和紙の里といって紙すき場のところの工芸館に描いた作品で32枚の作品を描きました。
This is a picture of my work in Echizen in Japan, where it is at the washi factory in Echizen, and there were 32 pieces that I created.
でこちらは一般のご家庭に依頼されて描いた作品です。
In these pictures, these doors were commissioned by a private family.
で次にインスタレーションを近年インスタレーションの展示をしておりまして、先ほども見せてくださいましたけれども、ビトゥインのシリーズとなります。
And this here is from the Between series, which Susie touched on earlier.
はい、説明を先ほど詳しくしてくださったので、飛ばしますが、この作品は場所によって、展示が変わるということで、場所でフォルムを変えていくという作品にもなります。
This is an interesting installation which changes its form, it transforms itself depending on where it is installed.
でこれは200枚の和紙を使っているんですけれども、こちらとこちらは同じもので、展示を変えています。
This piece right here uses 200 pieces of washi, but they are installed in different ways.
でこちらも展示風景になりますが、ちょっとスピードを出して、先ほどのインスタレーションとして、干潟のインスタレーションです。
So that picture was about the installation that Susie also touched upon earlier, the installation over the water.
で近年映像の作品も作っておりまして、こちらは映像の作品となります。
I've been working with video installations lately, so this is one of them.
でこちらは昨年千葉市美術館の方で3ヶ月間、行った展示となります。
This is the installation held at Chiba Museum, and I had an installation showing for 3 months at the museum.
で来場者が、これ障子なんですけれども、この障子に穴を開けて塞いでいくという展覧会をしました。
So here you can see the shoji screens, and visitors can poke holes in them, and they can fix them themselves.
で最初は白い空間がだんだん黒くなっていくという。
It was interesting how the space which looked white turns darker in color.
でこちらにそこの会場の中に私のアトリエを設けて、3ヶ月間の間で、作品を制作しました。
I was also afforded a studio inside of the museum, and while the installation was showing for 3 months, I kept creating.
でこちらのここにあるこの大きな、作品は、1枚で付いている和紙、手すきの和紙になります。
This piece on the floor, as you can see, it is a washi paper. See how big it is, but it is made by hand, and it is one single piece of washi.
で先ほどもこのように、パフォーマンスとして、手元で作品を制作して、下から映像を映してそれを大きな和紙に映していくというパフォーマンス風景です。
This is a performance that I did where I'm painting, and the process of creating is projected onto a big screen live in real time.
そして、こちらからは、今年の5月の18日まで、奈良県立美術館で行っていた展覧会となります。
This is from an exhibition that went on until May 18th at Nara Prefectural Museum.
で先ほどもこれは、ビトミンなんですけれども、ビトミンでも100種類の一枚一枚100種類違う墨色を描いて、展示したものとなります。
This installation is from between. There are 100 pieces of washi, and each piece carries different shades of ink.
でその際に墨そのもののオブジェを初めて作りました。墨で作ったオブジェになります。
This is a sculpture that I created, and this was my first time trying this, but it's a sculpture made of the
炭素
ink.
ですね。炭素をに革で固めた
With the ink stick material. So it is the soup glued together.
で奈良県立美術館では6曲の屏風やこの軸も、制作しました。
For the Nara Museum, I've also created 6-sided panel, and as well as scrolls.
で先ほど少し出してくれましたけれども、今プロジェクトとして、作品、 プロジェクトとして、作品とともに旅をするというプロジェクトを行っています。
And currently, I'm taking on this new project where I travel around the world carrying my artwork.
いろんなところに行ってるわけですけれども、これは先月ニューヨークで、メモリアルデーだった日に、展示をして、映像と写真の作品を作りました。
So, since I was here in New York last month, this was taken on Memorial Day.
で、このような、
And I created images and videos.
はい、このような感じで今作品を描いていて活動をさせていただいています。
These are some of the works that I have been working on or have created. And,
はい、簡単ですけれども、ご紹介を終わらせていただいて、
I kind of ran
質
through the
問を
whole
ござい
thing.
ます。
But I'm ready for the interview now.
Slide to keep up with the talk, I think. Okay. So I want to go into a little bit of your background. So you are a self-taught painter, and you've really cultivated this quite specific artistic language over the past 30 or so years of making art. Could you tell me a little bit about your first works of ink painting and what kind of inspired you to begin?
最初の頃は油を描いていました。油絵を描いていました。で、私は何で墨の制作になったかというと、お茶の茶道を長くやっておりましたので、その影響がすごく大きいと思います。
Well, I actually was painting in oil at the beginning. The reason why I changed my medium to Sumi ink has a lot to do with my practice in tea ceremony.
墨というのは、多分私の墨はとても自然に近いものなので、私の体にすごい合ってたと思うんですね。で、普段その茶道で床の間のお軸を見ていて、作品はもう本当に昔から墨の作品を見ていたということで、墨の作品、墨を手にしたんだと思います。
To me, the material Sumi ink is very close to nature. It's natural, and I find it very agreeable to my physical being in itself, but also in terms of tea ceremony. When you do tea ceremony in the tokonoma alcove, they always have a scroll hanging, and I was so used to seeing the scroll at the place of tea ceremony.
で、それを自分で描いてみたいと思いました。
And it inspired me. Oh, maybe I can paint something like this myself.
Did you always paint abstract works, or when you began working in ink, did you paint other subject matter?
はい、初めは、赤ちゃんの絵とか胎児の絵をたくさん描いていました。
I actually started out by painting images of babies and fetuses.
それは自分の経験として出産っていうのを経験して、赤ちゃんをもう命というふうに捉えて描いていました。
that stems from my experience as a mother giving birth to a baby. So I started seeing babies as life itself.
で赤ちゃんというのはもう本当に命というところで、そのもう命ということを思うと、赤ちゃんの姿形が消えてなくなって、でその存在だけになっていったという感じです。
So as I kept painting babies, symbolizing life, then as I painted on, eventually the shapes and the forms of baby disappeared, and then the essence remained, and that's what ended up happening in my creation.
でその存在を追いかけていたら、姿形がなくなって抽象的な表現になっていたんだと思います。
So as I continued painting life, the forms and shapes eventually disappeared, and that led to my concentrating on abstract work.
One of the forms that I see coming up again and again in your work is the circle. This comes up as, you know, both kind of a small detail of works and at other times like the main focus, the kind of all-encompassing form of a piece. Does the circle have a specific kind of symbolism for you?
はい、自然界のものは角がなくてやっぱり円になるというところもありますし、円イコール命の玉というところで表現をしています。
In natural world, there's not so many things that are really angular. Everything is flowing and closer to circles. And also, a circle for me symbolizes a sphere of life.
でその命がつながっていく連鎖であったり、それは細胞であったり、そしてその中に入って描く、外から見て描く、そういうことになっていると思います。
And a circle also has to do with the chain of life, continuing life, and also has something to do with biological cells themselves. And so it gives me an option to be able to write from inside of an object rather than the outside.
So there's this really kind of strong connection between your artwork, the symbols you incorporate, the materials you use, and nature and life.
そうですね。やはり自分の体験から感じたものを、その感じた時に正直に書いていかれたら、それが私にとっての表現だなというふうに思っています。
Yes, I agree with that. That my own experience, there's my experience and how I feel about it, and it's my. I aim to paint whatever I feel in that moment as honestly and straightforward as possible.
I want to talk a little bit about kind of ink more generally and about your place in ink art. So ink has been used by artists in East Asia for millennia and artists outside of Asia for centuries. Is there anything from the tradition of ink that you incorporate into your practice, and what do you leave behind from ink history?
墨絵というものはもちろん墨も和紙もとても歴史とともに今あるもの、伝統的なものだと思います。 その伝統長い本当に歴史の中の墨と和紙というところで、今私がそれを手にして今表現として何ができるかというところで、やはり今生きているというところを書いていかれたらなというふうに思っています。
Of course, the materials, sumi, ink, and washi have a long tradition and it has a history. It's very, very long and very traditional, but using that, what I would like to do, what can I do with this very traditional materials is, I think, I want to express life using the old materials.
墨はとても伝統的なので古いものだというふうに思いがちですけれども、今私が手にして、本当に地球の中の自然に近い、素晴らしい素材であるというふうに思っていて、とても新しいものだというふうに捉えて描いています。
I think the general concept of the sumi ink and washi is, oh, they're old-fashioned, they're ancient. But when I pick up the inkstone, I feel that the ink is very close to nature, close to earth, which is new to me. And so I would like to approach it as something new.
Something kind of still living and fresh.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's something that happens a lot in the West in particular, is people will sort of silo ink art as something that's solely historical and not something that's contemporary and live-in. What do you see as kind of the place for ink in the contemporary art world? I mean, I know we have, galleries like SEIZAN who are bringing contemporary ink artwork to New York. Other galleries who are kind of incorporating it with contemporary art of other media. But how do you see ink fitting into that?
私自身はこれだけ長く墨と和紙と共に制作をしてきて、もう本当に可能性が無限にある世界であるなというのは感じています。
I've been working with the sumi ink and washi for such a long time, and I see now how the possibility for these materials is actually infinite.
角度を変えればもっともっとたくさんの見方、たくさんな表現の仕方が限りなくあるのではないかなというふうにいつも思っています。
And I'm always exploring different ways of expression using the materials, because when you look at the same materials from a different angles, change the viewpoint, and then you can see how many, an infinite number of possibilities for these seemingly old materials.
We certainly see such a wide variety of work in this exhibition, in your presentation, in your practice in general. I think for one final question, I'll ask, what is your hope that people will take away from this exhibition, that visitors will take away?
和紙と墨のこういう作品というのはなかなか立ち止まらないと見えてこない色や表情がたくさんあると思います。でそれはやはり日常の私たちの生活にとても似ていて、立ち止まると墨の色も一色ではないっていうふうに 気づくと思います。その気づきを持って帰ってもらえたらなというふうに思ってます。
The ink art is something that you have to slow down, stop, and take a moment to really look at. Otherwise, you can't really see the real shades of the paintings and the expressions that are in there. I think it's very much like our daily life, everyday life. If you keep going and not slow down, then you can't see the small things. And so with the ink art, my paintings as well, you will notice that it's not just black and white, it's not just monochromatic compositions. There are different shades. I just want you to, what I would like you to take away from this exhibition is for you to notice the subtleties of each piece.
それぞれの人が見る記憶とか自分の中の内面で、モノクロームじゃなくてモノクロームではなくて自分の豊かな色に変えていっていただけたらいいなと思いながらいつも描いています。
So, when you go home and remember my pieces, I would like you to remember in your memory, see my pieces with different shades and colors according to your own memories, and not just pieces that are in monochromatic tones. And every time I'm creating a piece, that's something that's always on in the back of my mind.
Thank you, Keiko. And I think we're going to have some time to look around the gallery, to chat a little bit, and to spend some time with Keiko-san's paintings now. Thank you again to SEIZAN Gallery.
Thank you. Thank you. Are we good?
One question. The white within these Sumi paintings, it's not clear from here, but is it white ink? Or is it something that's been extracted, bleached or, taken away?
Not bleach. これはじゃなくて乾かす時間が違うというふうに書いています。同じ墨色でも乾かす時間が違うと墨色が変わります。それを利用して、描いているという。
Of the same ink, the shades change depending on how long it takes for that the spot to dry. So that is what I utilized in creating this piece.
Is this the white of the
Yeah. これは後から描いているんですけれども、こことここは同じ墨色です。
That bottom part I actually painted over, but the two shades that are right above it are with the same ink.
早く乾かすところとずっと乾かさないところを作りながら描いています。
So I painted so that one area dries up faster than the other area.
Like a watercolor.
なんか水彩風。
そうですね。和紙は水がすごく重要になってきますけれども、上に乗せるということではなくて、中に染み込ませていく、全部染み込ませていくという和紙の中に染み込んでいくという仕事になるので、それができるのだと思います。
In a sense, you might be right. However, the way that Sumi ink works is it doesn't sit on the surface of the canvas per se, on the surface of the paper, but it seeps deeply into the washi paper in itself. It's totally absorbed. And I think these effects can be achieved because of that, the characteristic of the ink.
Anybody else have a question? Are we good? Okay, so thank you, Susie. Thank you, Keiko, and thank you, Akiko-san, for the interpretation. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. And just please hang out, and you can ask questions to Susie or Keiko-san directly. Okay, thank you.